On bank deposits, much outrage in Cyprus. The parliament was supposed to vote on it.
The European Central Bank said bluntly, come up with a deal by Monday or emergency funding for your banks will cease.
And it would have set a very dangerous precedent for the whole of Europe.
And a decision not to respect that deposit guarantee scheme is just a terrible decision.
And we're back again. This is Radio Free Canada. Hi there, I'm Darren Howard.
I'm Robert Nisbet.
And I'm Monica Stallmark.
We're here for your entertainment. Well, actually, no, we're here for your edification as we talk about banks. And we believe that banks should start paying income tax. Sound good?
Absolutely.
I have to.
Yes. 60% of our wages go to income tax. It doesn't happen. But there's something happening overseas. Let's start things off as we take a look at banking at Radio Free Canada.
Some breaking news for you, and it is from Cyprus. According to Market News, the finance minister of Cyprus has resigned. And we'll just remind you that Cyprus is at the center of what appears to be a small crisis in Europe. It has to do with the proposed bailout, or bail-in if you prefer, of the Mediterranean island nation using bank deposits, a tax on bank deposits. Much outrage in Cyprus. The parliament was supposed to vote on it about 15 minutes from now. Our man on the ground, Ryan Chilko, telling us that may not yet happen. Still some wrangling to go on between Cyprus and the IMF and the EU to get to a decision that Cypriot lawmakers.
And yes, that's job security for us. Talking about finance ministers getting fired, resigning, and generally getting thrown under a truck.
He's lucky he doesn't reside in Iran.
Yes. They do not waste prison space with bankers out of control in Iran. Joe Flaherty should be paying attention to that, but of course he's not. But we are. And that's why we're Radio Free Canada. Thank you, Monica Selmark, with us here today from prohealthnow.ca. Yes?
Good morning.
Yeah, you know it. We're taking control of the situation and making sure you get informed about what's going on in the real world. So stay tuned as we take a look at the banking and finance industry and the way it affects you. Radio Free Canada.
So then, the Cypriot Parliament is now due to vote on the proposed cuts on Wednesday at about 1600 GMT. But for now, let's get some perspective, shall we, on the levy with the United Kingdom Independence Party MEP Nigel Farage. Mr Farage, evening to you. Every bailout, of course, comes with strings attached. It's never easy. But can Cyprus afford the price the EU set here?
Well, I mean, what's really happening here is we have an irreconcilable split between the north and the south of Europe. And in the north of Europe, and particularly I'm thinking about Germany, the Netherlands and Finland, there are very strong political voices saying we do not want to go on bailing out southern European countries. And bear in mind that Cyprus is now the 5th country out of 17 that's needed to be bailed out. And that is why the Germans extracted the terms that they did. But I must say, even in my direst predictions in this Parliament over the years about the way the EU bosses were behaving, never did I think that they would, in a completely unprecedented manner, resort to stealing money from people's bank accounts.
Well, it's because the EU can't afford to. It can't afford Cyprus to fail, can it? Look at the jitters that have already happened over what's gone on the last couple of days.
Well, it can't afford Cyprus to fail, it can't afford Greece to fail, Portugal, Spain or Ireland. They know that once one country goes, the whole deck of cards will come tumbling down, and countries like Germany will realise absolutely vast losses, possibly as much as €1 trillion. So they are prepared now to do anything, literally anything, to try to keep the euro afloat, and that is why they've now resorted, as I say, to what can only be described as theft.
Nigel Farage, MEP for the United Kingdom Independence Party, thank you for your time tonight.
So if you've been watching mainstream media, you probably didn't hear the whole story about what happened in Cyprus. The IMF has stepped forward and has told the citizens, we are going to balance your country's books. We're going to take money out of your bank account, 10% that they would take out of their private savings accounts to take care of an IMF, the imaginary monetary fund.
Well, all they're doing is acting like the criminal cartel bankers that they are.
Yeah, and you can't say that all in one statement for sure. But did you hear about this? Did you hear about what was going on?
I had not heard anything until I came to the studio today. And it's funny that they choose to take money from the people that don't have much instead of the ones that went And embezzled or stole all the money to begin with.
Yeah, and we don't really have a clear story on why the IMF is stepping in. 5 years ago, they brought the euro to Cyprus. 5 years later, Cyprus is bankrupt.
Well, maybe we should ask John Perkins, the economic hitman who wrote that book on Confessions of.
You know, Confessions of an Economic Hitman is powerful stuff. It looks at the international interventionism that the banksters are bringing to everybody. People in the Middle East, people around the world know what they're, protesting against. It's these bankers coming in and ripping everybody off. But now, just up to date, let's run this.
Okay.
Okay.
Hundreds of bank employees stormed the barricades as Parliament prepared to debate conditions for the bailout. Word had spread that the employees of the Marfin Popular Bank were to lose their jobs as part of a reorganisation of the banking sector. They were angry and ready for confrontation. Earlier, the president met with party leaders with an uncompromising message from Brussels sitting in his in-tray. The European Central Bank said bluntly, come up with a deal by Monday or emergency funding for your banks will cease. There was cautious optimism that a solution could be found.
We are working very hard. There is only one target, to save our economy and our country. I believe that the political parties will show the necessary responsibility for the survival of Cypriot economy.
Parliament is in session to debate the first part of Plan B, with a bill to nationalise the state and semi-state pensions of government employees, issuing bonds on the funds that would raise more than half of the required $7 billion to allow the bailout to go ahead.
Once we have rejected the plan, there is no other solution but selling of assets. And the question is, what assets can we sell? We can, on the one hand, nationalize banks and the provident funds, which will give us about 3.5 billion. And then, of course, try to exploit the possibility of the natural gas and the eventual deposits of oil in the economic zone of Cyprus.
The financial reality of life in Cyprus today becoming clear now. The banks have been closed for 6 days, the stock market exchange hasn't opened this week, and the supply of ready cash is starting to dry up. This was never going to be a painless experience for the people of Cyprus, and there'll be more scenes like these as the effects of the rescue package begin to roll out. Peter Sharp, Al Jazeera in Nicosia.
And of course, that not being covered, what happened over in Cyprus this week, the IMF says we're going to take money out of your bank accounts. Bank machines run dry, are refilled, and then people wait in line like for tickets, at a rock concert just to get their money out.
Their money. Well, it's safer to keep your money in a mattress now than in a bank.
And there's actual economists saying that.
I know.
In Cyprus, they say, take your money out as fast as you can because they're sewering their own banks. And the banks were closed today, being Friday. They may not open on Monday.
They may never reopen. The Cyprus banks may fail.
Yes, and this could be another thing. Of course, the answer for Cyprus being Iceland.
Well, maybe for all of us.
Yes. But, okay, it's a hard thing to try to picture a world without, cash, without money.
Well, we've done it at one time, haven't we?
Yeah.
Wasn't there bartering and services and coming down to the value of our actual skill and time?
There was 1 million people in London without central banking, and they all got fed.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is in the 1700s.
Yeah, exactly.
We were, imagine doing that with an iPhone. We'd actually be able to do something. We are taking a look at solutions around the board right now, and because, we're not getting the major news, Cyprus, they have a solution that is going to kind of shock you.
After days of uncertainty, one clear message. 36 votes against and 19 abstentions. A resounding no from the Cyprus Parliament. There will be no tax on savings in Cypriot banks.
It was a very weird thing. We were asked to legitimize the confiscation of savings. That never happened anywhere in the world, and it would have set a very dangerous precedent for the whole of Europe.
Hundreds of protesters had gathered to urge their leaders to reject the controversial Brussels bailout plan. But when it became apparent their voices would be heard, the mood turned to one of jubilation. But Cyprus's financial crisis remains. It needs to find the cash from somewhere. It could turn to Russia or once again ask its own people. And then you have the investors who are worried about the safety of their savings. Will they make a run on the banks on Thursday when they finally open their doors? One senior MP told me, we're expecting trouble.
We'll have problems, serious problems, but we will do our utmost to face them.
And will you turn to Russia for finance now?
Of course we will turn to Russia and to anybody who is ready to help us.
Cyprus has called Brussels' bluff, but it could backfire with disastrous consequences. Ashish Joshi, Sky News, Cyprus.
You know, being what it is, solutions. Looking to Russia? Wow, that's got to make people at the Fed kind of...
What they're offering is their gas reserves that are offshore, and Russia's willing to put up the money for future consideration for exploration.
Yeah, okay. Talking about the Fed losing hold, okay. But the other thing that we talked about in pre-production this morning you didn't hear about was the fact that the Fed is expected to fold in April. And you never heard that?
No.
Never heard that. Around the major financial news right across the world, they're expecting the American dollar to fail, to totally fold up and be bankrupt in April.
Well, as long as the American dollar is pinned to the oil market,
yes, then
it's going to remain supreme. But once you take that underpinnings away, it's going to collapse.
Yeah, and there's nothing left to it. Of course, Iran is doing trade right now without the American dollar for oil with Russia and China right now. Russia and China have said, if you strike Iran, you're striking our indigenous oil. We're going to strike back. There's other news that was not carried, and China said, by the way, we will clean your clock. And the general in the Chinese military said that. But, CBC
well, there's
talking about Justin Bieber.
Justin Bieber at his Fashion Week in Toronto.
Well, is that why Harper is pushing so hard onto the Keystone thing down to the States?
Oh, yeah.
Let's get this moving, rock and roll.
Just bang on, okay? Because if they don't get it going now, they're hooped. They can't get it going in the future. I want to just cover this one last thing. Yes, can we do this? Okay.
Because, people aren't really trusting so much anymore.
Funny.
Just who do you trust with your money? Well, before last weekend, you may have begrudgingly said the banks. But a nightmarish precedent has now been set. In times of trouble, your money is in danger. Cyprus may have voted against the raid on savers' cash, but there's been a shattering breach of trust. Where do Europe's banks go from here?
We have a deposit guarantee scheme in the EU, and a decision not to respect that deposit guarantee scheme is just a terrible decision. And the reason why it's terrible is that in any jurisdiction, if you don't abide by your own rules, trust just disappears.
The banking sector in Europe now has twice as much capital than it had before the crisis. So I think by now it is more robust, but it will grow even more robust going forward. But savers can be absolutely certain that they will have their money when they approach the bank.
The banks are, and they have to, doing their best to restore this trust. It's a business relationship between two sides, and trust is a necessary part of that. So I think it's going to be a slow process, but it's one which we just have to work at.
Yes, and that's how we do it right here at Radio Free Canada. The banks should be paying income tax. We did start that off, right?
Rebuilding trust could be an issue.
Yes, we need trust in bankers. I don't know.
Well, I'd love to see them actually pay some money.
Yeah.
I might start trusting them a little bit.
So if they start paying, we'll stop talking. But we are here until the truth comes out, because we're not about the BS. We are not telling you to trust us. We're saying just hang out, because we're going to talk about Keystone XL next. I'm Darren Howard.
I'm Robert Nisbet.
And I'm Monica Solmark.
Thanks for tuning in to Radio Free Canada. Remember, activism is winning. We'll be right back.
Go Girl Power.